In this video, I'm going to show you how to get the most out of your Insta360 X3 in low light environments. On this channel, I share all the latest action camera news, reviews, and how-tos, so like and subscribe to get the most out of your camera. How well the camera performs in low light has a lot to do with the size of the camera sensor. A larger sensor can gather more light and will have larger pixels, which means a higher resolution image. Action cameras are bad in low light because the sensors need to be small to keep the size and weight of the camera down. No one wants to ride down a hill with this strapped to their head. There are 3 adjustments we can make to improve the camera's low light performance. We can adjust the frames per second, the shutter speed, and the ISO. Frames per second is how many still images your camera is taking every second. So if you set your camera to 24 frames per second, it is taking 24 still images every second. In low light situations, you want to lower the frames per second. That allows the sensor to gather more light, which brightens the image. Conversely, if you're shooting in slow motion, the camera is set to 120 to 240 frames per second, so not a lot of light can make it in, so you need to shoot slow motion on a bright sunny day. Next is shutter speed. The 180-degree shutter rule states that the shutter speed should be set at twice the frame rate. If your camera is set to 24 frames per second, the shutter speed should be set to 1/48th or 1/50th. If your camera is set to 30 frames per second, it should be set to 1/60th. Following the 180-degree shutter rule creates motion blur, giving your video a more natural look. However, in low light situations, you may have to break this rule. If your camera is stationary or recording a relatively still image, you want that slow shutter speed. But if you're walking around and moving, if you keep that shutter speed too low, it makes the light blurry. If you take a look at your footage and notice when you're walking around the light is blurring, what you want to do is up that shutter speed to 120, maybe all the way up to 240 if you're really moving fast. The last camera setting you can adjust is the ISO. ISO is the camera's sensitivity to light. If you increase the ISO, the image gets brighter, but it brings in a lot of noise, reducing the image quality. I'll show you some video I took with my camera. Here I have the frame rate set to 24 frames per second and the shutter speed set to 1/50th, the ISO set to 400. You can see when I'm walking, the image gets blurry and shakes. There are 2 reasons for that. 1, the electronic image stabilization doesn't work very well in low light, and 2, the shutter speed is too low. Upping the shutter speed to 120 reduces the blur but darkens the image, which means you have to increase the ISO, introducing more noise into the image. I upped the shutter speed to 120 and increased the ISO to 640. It looks a lot smoother and sharper now. Action cameras are really meant to be used on bright sunny days, so you're not going to get the best quality in low light situations. So the best thing you can do is adjust how you're going to take your shot. I suggest doing slow movements, shooting things that are stationary, because if you're moving around too much, it's going to create blur, and then you have to up the shutter speed, and then you're going to have to increase the ISO, and then it's going to get even noisier. Setting the ISO to 640 worked well. You could push it to 800, but I wouldn't go any higher than that. What do you think about the image quality of the X3 in low light? Let me know in the comments. One thing to keep in mind, the image quality on the screen is going to look better than the final product. When I was looking at the screen, all the images were brighter and sharper than what they actually ended up being. So it's best to do some test shots in low light situations. That way you can see how it's going to look and you can make the minor adjustments to the shutter speed, to the ISO, so you're going to have some idea of what the final product is going to look like, and you won't be shocked or disappointed when you thought it was going to look better. After doing some testing and adjusting, I found the best low light settings for the X3 to be 30 frames per second, a shutter speed of 120, and an ISO of 640. To learn even more about your Insta360 X3, check out this video.